Yeah, they dropped the officer driving a white and blue Dodge van. He threw a gas tank on top of her, and the only thing you can see out is her feet.
What's your name?
Oh, I don't say the nonsense. I know too many people. Okay, then, bye-bye.
Los Angeles, the second most populous city in the US, home of Hollywood, movie magic, hopes and dreams, and murder. In the district known as South Central, poverty was rampant, drugs were everywhere, and people were being killed at a high rate. As it turns out, in 1980s Los Angeles, there were actually several serial killers at work, but one managed to ply his trade under the noses of police until 2010. Before that, he was known only as the Grim Sleeper. Lonnie David Franklin Jr. was born on August 30th, 1952 in Los Angeles. His father, Lonnie Sr., worked as a longshoreman, and his mother, Ruby, was a hairdresser. He also had a younger sister and older half-brother. Lonnie's childhood seems to have been pretty normal, although he was a bad student and struggled in school, and he actually got expelled 2 weeks before graduation for fighting. Just 2 weeks before the graduation, so it's not hard to conclude that he was not the brightest mind. However, he was street smart, and even as a teenager developed a charming and manipulative personality that would later serve him in picking up victims. He was trained in auto repair and fixed the cars of gang members, while his first legitimate job was bagging groceries. First brush with the law occurred at age 16, when he was arrested for breaking and grand theft auto, but his next crime would be much more serious. In 1971, Lonnie joined the army, and in 1974, while stationed in Stuttgart, Germany, was in a car with 2 fellow soldiers when they stumbled upon a 17-year-old German girl. They offered a ride, which she unfortunately accepted, but before taking her home, they drove to a field where they took turns sexually assaulting her at knife point. She would later recall a flash, as though one of them had taken a photo of the assault. The victim had the presence of mind to ask Lonnie for his telephone number, pretending to have interest in him, and he happily obliged. It was pure coincidence that he chose him, since he probably had the lowest IQ from all 3. After reporting the assault to the police, a sting operation was set up, in which the girl arranged to meet Lonnie on the train station. When he approached her, she gave a signal, and the German police appeared and arrested him. Strangely, Lonnie served less than 1 year in prison, while his companions each served 4. He returned to Los Angeles and was briefly married to a woman whose name has been lost. That woman was a drug and alcohol abuser, which some people believe was the trigger for Lonnie deciding to victimize these types of women. His second wife, Sylvia, was the exact opposite, a devout Christian who stood by him throughout his arrest and incarceration, and with whom he had 2 children, Christopher and Crystal. The crimes attributed to the Grim Sleeper began on August 10, 1985, when mother and cocktail waitress Deborah Jackson was found on Vermont Avenue, partially hidden under a rug. She had been beaten and shot in the chest with a .25 caliber pistol. Just 2 days later, the body of 34-year-old Henrietta Wright was found under a mattress in an alley popular with homeless people. She had been shot twice at close range with the same .25 caliber weapon that killed Deborah Jackson. The mother of 5 had grown up in Watts and had recently turned to crack when her house burned down. During this time, the community was unhappy with the way the LAPD was handling the case, and protesters often gathered outside of the police station. However, FBI would later determine that 4 separate serial killers were operating in the area at the same time, making these crimes even more difficult to solve. Just after midnight on January 10, 1987, an anonymous 911 call came in to report a body being dumped in an alley.
Yeah, they dropped the officer driving a white and blue Dodge van. He threw a gas tank on top of her, and the only thing you can see out is her feet.
What's your name?
Oh, I'm saying the nonsense. I know too many people. Okay then, bye-bye.
When the police reported to the scene, they found the battered body of a woman partially hidden under debris with her upper body inside of a garbage bag. Fingerprints identified her as a 23-year-old Barbara Ware, who was last seen on New Year's Eve. Her family initially suspected that she had been killed by a drug dealer to whom she owed money, but a .25 caliber bullet in her chest presented a link with other cases. And unfortunately, there were other cases. April 16, 1987, 2 men were walking across a parking lot on Western Avenue when they noticed a human foot sticking out of a dumpster. It belonged to 26-year-old Bernita Sparks, who had been shot in the chest and also had a ligature mark around her neck. A witness reported that she had heard a woman scream in the early morning hours and saw a black man leaving the alley. 26-year-old Mary Lowe, who also went by Brenda, was last seen leaving the Love Trap Bar on Western Avenue at about 1:15 a.m. on November 1st, 1987. She's been a dancer on the TV show Soul Train. Her body was found in an alley between a bush and wall, twisted and face down. And she too had been shot at a close range. Police had many suspects and questioned hundreds of people, but simply couldn't get a break in the killings. They then referred to as the Southside Slayer murders. 22-year-old Lucretia Jefferson was found dumped in an alley under a mattress on West 102nd Street. Strangely, a napkin with the word AIDS covered her face. She also liked to dance and roller skate, and had last been seen at a crack house on Western Avenue. On September 6, 18-year-old Monique Alexander told her family that she was going to the liquor store, but never returned. The following day, 4 boys were walking their dog near West 43rd Street when the dog started digging at a discarded mattress. Monique's body was underneath, with a gunshot wound in her chest and a shirt tied around her neck. But still, there was no sign of the suspect. However, only 2 months later, in November, the police got their biggest break, when somebody met the Grim Sleeper and lived to tell about it. Anitra Washington was walking down the street on her way to a friend's house when a dark-skinned black man in an orange Pinto pulled up alongside her and tried to coax her into the car. Against her better judgment, Anitra unfortunately accepted the ride, and the man started driving the wrong way. When she pointed this out, he said that he had to stop at his uncle's house. According to Anitra, his demeanor strangely changed when he got back into the car. He called her Brenda. Remember, this was Mary Lowe's alias, and he accused her of dodging him out. Being the only survivor of Lonnie, she gave numerous states and interviews over the years.
You're the only one who survived this serial killer.
I'm so far the survivor that we only know of.
When Anitria, a home health care provider, accepted a ride from a friendly man driving an orange Pinto, she had no idea she was getting into the car with the notorious Grim Sleeper. The man behind the wheel had already savagely killed 7 women, and Anitria was supposed to be number 8. And you didn't get a weird vibe from him?
Well, I did.
Your gut said, don't get in the car.
Don't get in the car, and I did it anyway.
What happens inside that car, she says, plays out like a real-life horror movie.
Everything just got really quiet. I mean, eerie quiet. And I'm going.
The madman shot Anitria point blank in the chest and then began to savagely rape her. He's shot you.
Yes.
He is sexually violating you.
Yes.
Driving you around.
Right.
And you're dying.
I'm going, how could you kiss me and do all this and I'm bleeding?
After hours of torture, Anitria makes a life or death decision. She grabs for the door handle. He probably thought you were never going to make it. He probably thought you were dead.
I believe that he thought the same thing, that I'd probably get run over and just lay there in the street anyway.
But Anitria was a fighter. Doctors are able to retrieve a small .25 caliber bullet from her chest. Ballistics reveals it's a match. The same gun was used on the Grim Sleeper's 7 other victims.
This is the same guy, same gun, same MO. She changed everything for the LAPD, really. The fact that she had the bullet in her chest.
Cops finally had someone who could put a face on the killer.
Badly wounded, Anitria made her way to friend's house. She was transported to the nearest hospital in a dire condition. When surgeons removed the bullet from her chest, they found that it was a .25 caliber, matching the rest of the sleeper victims. But strangely, the Grim Sleeper was quiet for the next 15 years. Actually, it was this period that prompted the newspaper to give him that particular nickname. Police theorized that he was either frightened by his close call following the survival of Anitria, or that he continued killing, but perhaps in a different area. In 2001, the LAPD started a cold case unit, and one of their first projects was the Sleeper murders. All of the victims had several things in common. They were black women, all were shot at a close range with a .25 caliber weapon, all were dumped near Western Avenue in South Central, and all were missing their underwear. The youngest victim, 15-year-old Princess Bartholomew, was found in March 2002 in Inglewood, dumped in some weeds with a ligature mark around her neck. Born to an abusive family, Princess had endured a horrific life until she was taken into foster care as a toddler. Upon the death of her foster mother, however, Princess ran away and started living on the streets, getting entangled with sex work. In 2004, police got a DNA cross-hit in the system when the DNA collected from a 2003 victim was matched to that of the sleeper victims, and it was a 35-year-old Valerie McCorvey. Her cause of death was strangulation, but DNA from a bite mark on her breast connected her to the other victims. And the last known victim of the Grim Sleeper was 25-year-old Janisha Peters, who was found on the morning of January 1st, 2007 by a homeless man looking for cans on Western Avenue. She had been folded and placed in a zip-tied bag, then thrown into a dumpster. She had been shot in the lower back and possibly asphyxiated. The same year, forensics tied the DNA in the saliva on Janisha's zip ties with that in the saliva on Princess and Valerie's bodies. The following year, a powerful new forensic tool debuted in California that would eventually solve both the Joseph DeAngelo, aka the Golden State Killer, and the Grim Sleeper cases. But again, the case went quiet, that is, until 2010. Detective Dennis Kilcoyne, head of the Grim Sleeper Task Force, was told that a state DNA lab had found 5 matches to the sleeper's DNA, with the top one being 28-year-old Christopher Franklin, Lonnie's son. Upon learning this, the task force excitedly trailed Franklin while trying to get a sample of his DNA to test. On July 5th, while he and his current girlfriend, yes, he has a wife and a girlfriend, are enjoying a kids' pizza party at the Buena Park Mall, a detective was disguised as a busboy and gathered Lonnie's used dishes. These same items were analyzed by the crime lab, which used the DNA on a napkin and a discarded pizza crust to get a match to that of the sleeper victims. Just 2 days later, 57-year-old Franklin was arrested at his home on West 81st Street. Upon seeing him for the first time, Detective Paul Coulter said, "This is the little shit we have been looking for all this time." And he really wasn't wrong, because that was exactly what Franklin was. Not only he denied all the accusations by the detectives, but he also had the audacity to actually insult all his victims. That's how arrogant he was. In the meantime, police were searching his residence, a small greenhouse in the epicenter of where the victims were dumped. Among the things they found were women's underwear, several guns, .25 caliber ammunition, $10,000 in cash, homemade movies with Franklin and several different women, and hundreds of Polaroids of females in various states of undress, some of whom looked drugged or even dead. Also found were the IDs and photos of other women who were suspected victims. Due to numerous delays, Franklin's trial wasn't held until 2016. The jury deliberated for 1 day before finding him guilty on 10 counts of murder and 1 of attempted murder. He was also linked to, but not charged with, 5 other victims and was sentenced to death by Judge Kathleen Kennedy. However, he would not live to see his date with the executioner. On March 28, 2020, Lonnie Franklin was found dead in his cell of natural causes. The Grim Sleeper had finally met with the Grim Reaper.